Most people believe that self-control means suppressing emotion. They think discipline means staying calm. They think strength means never feeling anger, frustration, or fear. But that is not how the human mind works. Emotion is energy. And when that energy has no direction, it does not disappear. It builds pressure. You see it everywhere. A man sends a message he immediately regrets. Someone loses their temper in a meeting. A small frustration ruins an entire day. A single moment of anger damages a relationship. The problem is not emotion. The problem is what happens when emotion takes control before thought can respond. For many people, this pattern repeats for years. They promise themselves they will stay calm next time. They tell themselves they will react differently. But when the next emotional moment arrives, the same reaction appears again. Anger takes over. Stress takes over. Impulse takes over. It begins to feel as if emotions are stronger than discipline. But centuries ago, martial philosophers in Japan approached this problem differently. They did not try to eliminate emotion. Instead, they asked a different question. What if emotional intensity was not a weakness? What if it was energy that simply needed direction? This idea became one of the most powerful principles in martial philosophy. It was called Seiryoku Zen'yō. Daniel had always believed he was a disciplined person. He worked hard. He read books about productivity. He tried to organize his days carefully, but there was one problem he could never fully control: his emotions. At work, the pattern appeared in small moments. A manager would question his work during a meeting. Daniel would feel a sudden wave of irritation. Even if he stayed quiet in the room, the frustration followed him for hours. His focus disappeared. Tasks that should have taken 30 minutes stretched into half the day. Sometimes the reaction was immediate. A short message from a colleague could trigger anger. Instead of pausing, Daniel would respond quickly. Later, when the emotion faded, he often reread the message and wished he had never sent it. At home, the pattern continued. Small disagreements turned into arguments. Minor inconveniences ruined his mood for the evening. Daniel began noticing something uncomfortable. The problem was not his intentions. Every morning he told himself the same thing. Today I will stay calm. Today I will focus. But when pressure appeared, the same cycle returned. Emotion arrived first. Reaction followed immediately. Logic always arrived too late. Over time, this pattern began to affect more than just his mood. At work, Daniel sometimes avoided difficult conversations because he feared reacting badly. In stressful moments, he postponed decisions instead of facing them. Important tasks were delayed because frustration drained his focus. The consequences were subtle but real. Opportunities passed to others who seemed calmer under pressure. Conversations with colleagues sometimes felt tense after emotional reactions. Even Daniel himself began to feel frustrated with his own behavior. One evening, after a long and exhausting day, the realization finally became clear. He was not lacking intelligence. He was not lacking discipline. The real problem was something deeper. Every strong emotion created a surge of energy. Anger created energy. Stress created energy. Frustration created energy. But Daniel had never learned what to do with that energy. Instead of directing it, he reacted to it. Instead of using it, he wasted it. And every time that energy exploded into reaction, it controlled his behavior. That night, Daniel began to understand something important. The real battle was not against emotion. The real battle was learning how to use emotional energy without letting it take control. Not long after that realization, Daniel encountered an idea that would completely change the way he understood discipline. It came from an unexpected place. A quiet martial arts instructor named Kenji. Daniel did not meet Kenji through philosophy. He met him through exhaustion. After months of stress and emotional reactions he could no longer ignore, Daniel began searching for something that might help him regain control of himself. Books about productivity had not solved the problem. Motivational advice had not helped either. The problem was not knowledge. It was behavior. One evening, while walking home after work, Daniel noticed a small martial arts dojo near his apartment. Through the window he could see a few students practicing slow, controlled movements on the mat. What caught his attention was not the speed or power of the training, it was the calm. Even during difficult drills, The students moved with a strange level of composure. There was effort, but no visible frustration. There was intensity, but no chaos. Curious, Daniel stepped inside. That was where he first met Kenji. Kenji was not loud or intimidating. He spoke calmly and moved with a quiet confidence that made it clear he had spent many years practicing discipline. During Daniel's first few training sessions, Kenji rarely gave long explanations. Instead, he simply observed. But one evening, after Daniel struggled during a difficult drill and showed clear frustration, Kenji stopped the practice. He looked at Daniel for a moment and said something simple. "Your problem is not emotion," he said. "Your problem is wasted energy." Daniel did not understand what he meant. Kenji then explained a principle that had guided martial training in Japan for generations. It was called Seiryoku Zen'yō. The phrase comes from Japanese martial philosophy and was famously emphasized by Jigoro Kano, the founder of Judo. Its meaning is simple: maximum efficient use of energy. In martial arts, this principle teaches that every movement should use energy wisely. Strength should not be wasted through unnecessary force. Instead, energy should be directed precisely toward the intended result. But Kenji explained that this idea was not limited to physical movement. The same rule applied to the mind. Anger, stress, frustration, and fear are all forms of energy. Most people treat these emotions as enemies. They try to suppress them or ignore them. But suppressed energy does not disappear. It builds pressure until it eventually bursts into reaction. Martial philosophy approaches emotion differently. Emotion is not the problem. Wasted energy is the problem. When emotional energy is directed with discipline, it becomes power. When it is uncontrolled, it becomes chaos. Kenji finished with a sentence Daniel would remember for a long time. "Emotion gives you energy," he said. "Discipline decides where that energy goes." At first, the idea of Seiryoku Zen'yō sounded simple. Use energy efficiently. Do not waste effort. Direct force instead of reacting blindly. But when Daniel tried to apply the principle in daily life, he quickly realized something. Understanding the idea was easy. Living it was much harder. The first real test came at work. During a meeting, Daniel's manager questioned a project decision he had made. The tone was sharp, and several colleagues were sitting around the table. Normally, this situation triggered the same reaction every time. Daniel would feel a surge of irritation rising almost instantly. His mind would begin preparing arguments before the conversation had even finished. But this time, something different happened. The emotional surge still appeared. The irritation was still there. But Daniel remembered Kenji's words. Emotion gives you energy. Discipline decides where that energy goes. For a brief moment, Daniel paused. Instead of reacting immediately, he focused on the feeling itself. The frustration was real. The pressure was real. But it was also energy. Instead of turning that energy into argument, Daniel redirected it toward listening carefully to the problem being raised. He asked a question instead of defending himself. The meeting continued. It was a small change, but something important had happened. For the first time, Daniel had redirected emotional energy instead of reacting to it. But the change was not immediate or perfect. Over the next few weeks, Daniel continued practicing the idea, both at the dojo and in daily life. Sometimes he succeeded. Sometimes he failed. One afternoon, after a stressful day filled with deadlines, a minor problem triggered an old reaction. A colleague made a careless mistake that forced Daniel to redo several hours of work. The frustration arrived instantly. Before he could stop himself, Daniel raised his voice. The room went quiet. The reaction had happened again. That evening, during training, Daniel told Kenji what had happened. Kenji listened calmly. Then he said something Daniel did not expect. "Good," Kenji replied. Daniel looked confused. Kenji explained that failure was part of the training. The goal was not to eliminate emotion. The goal was to notice it earlier. Every time you notice the energy before reacting, Kenji said, you gain more control. So Daniel continued practicing. He began watching his emotional reactions more closely. Instead of fighting emotions, he treated them like signals. When anger appeared, he noticed the surge of energy. When stress appeared, he noticed the increase in urgency. Instead of suppressing those feelings, he asked a simple question: where can this energy go? At work, frustration became focus. When pressure increased, Daniel used the energy to move through tasks more deliberately instead of becoming distracted by irritation. During difficult conversations, he redirected emotional tension into listening more carefully. Instead of reacting quickly, he allowed the energy to sharpen his attention. Gradually, small changes began to appear. The same situations that once triggered emotional reactions now produced a different response. During meetings, Daniel noticed that criticism no longer triggered immediate defensiveness. Instead, the emotional energy helped him concentrate more deeply on solving the problem. When deadlines created stress, the pressure pushed him toward action instead of avoidance. Even outside work, the change became visible. During disagreements at home, Daniel began noticing the moment when emotion began to rise. In the past, those moments often led to arguments. Now he paused, not because the emotion disappeared, but because he had learned something new. Emotion was not a command, it was energy waiting for direction. Still, the process was not smooth. Some days were better than others. Certain situations still triggered old habits, but one thing slowly became clear. The gap between emotion and reaction was growing. At the beginning, the reaction came instantly. Emotion appeared, and behavior followed. Now there was space, sometimes only a few seconds, but that space allowed Daniel to choose where the energy would go. Over the next several months, the practice became more natural. The dojo training helped reinforce the same lesson. In martial drills, Kenji often emphasized efficiency. When students used too much force, they lost balance. When movements were rushed, they wasted energy. But when motion was controlled and precise, even small movements became powerful. The same rule applied to the mind. Kenji often reminded the students of the principle. Energy is always present, he said. Your task is not to remove it. Your task is to guide it. Daniel began noticing something interesting. Many people around him struggled with the same problem he once had. They reacted quickly to stress. They became frustrated when things did not go their way. They tried to suppress emotion, only to lose control later. But Daniel was slowly learning a different skill. He was learning how to use emotional energy without letting it control him. One afternoon, months after he first learned the principle, Daniel faced a situation that once would have caused a strong reaction. A project he had spent weeks preparing was suddenly changed by upper management. Several hours of work would have to be redone. The old Daniel would have reacted with visible frustration. But this time, the reaction was different. The emotion still appeared. A surge of frustration moved through him. But instead of reacting outwardly, Daniel recognized it. There it is. Energy. Instead of arguing or complaining, he opened the project files and began reorganizing the plan. The emotional intensity became focus. The frustration became determination. Within a few hours, the project was moving forward again. That evening, Daniel realized something important. His emotions had not disappeared. He still felt anger. He still felt pressure. He still felt frustration. But those emotions were no longer controlling his behavior. They had become something else. Fuel. For the first time, Daniel understood what Kenji had meant. Seiryoku Zen'yō was not just a martial principle. It was a way of using the mind itself. Emotion was never the enemy. The real skill was learning how to direct its energy toward disciplined action. What Daniel was learning through practice is something modern neuroscience has begun to explain more clearly. When strong emotions appear, the brain enters a high-energy state. At the center of this reaction is a small structure deep inside the brain called the amygdala. Its job is to detect threats, stress, and emotionally important events. When the amygdala activates, the body quickly releases chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol. Heart rate increases, attention sharpens, energy rises. This reaction evolved to help humans respond quickly to danger. In ancient environments, That surge of energy helped people fight, escape, or react to sudden threats. But in modern life, the same system activates during everyday situations. A stressful email, a disagreement in a meeting, unexpected criticism. The body still produces the same surge of emotional energy. The problem is not the energy itself. The problem is how most people respond to it. When emotional energy appears, many people react automatically. The brain's emotional system becomes active first, while the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision-making and impulse control, needs more time to respond. If a person reacts immediately, behavior is often driven by emotion rather than thought. This is why people say things they later regret. This is why stress can turn into anger or impulsive decisions. But research in psychology and neuroscience shows that even a short pause can change this process. When a person slows down their reaction, the prefrontal cortex becomes more active. This part of the brain helps regulate emotion, evaluate consequences, and guide behavior toward long-term goals. In other words, emotional energy does not disappear. It is redirected. This is exactly what the principle of Seiryoku Zen'yō describes in philosophical terms. Instead of wasting energy through uncontrolled reaction, the mind learns to guide that energy into deliberate action. Athletes often experience this effect. The pressure before competition increases emotional intensity, but skilled athletes use that energy to sharpen focus rather than panic. The same pattern appears in disciplined performers, surgeons, pilots, and martial artists. They do not eliminate emotion. They train their minds to work with it. When emotional energy is redirected into purposeful behavior, the brain begins forming stronger patterns of control. Over time, this practice strengthens neural pathways that support focus, patience, and deliberate action. What began as a philosophical insight in martial training turns out to align closely with modern psychology. Emotion is not a weakness. It is raw mental energy, and when that energy is guided instead of suppressed, it becomes one of the most powerful tools for disciplined behavior. Months passed, and Daniel continued practicing the principle Kenji had introduced. At first, the changes were subtle. Most people around him would not have noticed the difference. The same situations still appeared in his life. Work remained demanding. Deadlines still created pressure. Unexpected problems continued to appear. The world had not changed, but Daniel had. One afternoon, a situation emerged that felt very familiar. During an important meeting, a senior manager criticized a strategy Daniel had spent weeks preparing. The criticism was direct and public. In the past, this moment would have triggered the same reaction every time: a surge of frustration, a defensive response, a tense argument that left the room uncomfortable. But this time, something different happened. The emotion still arrived. Daniel felt the familiar surge of irritation in his chest. His heart rate increased slightly. The energy was real. But instead of reacting immediately, he noticed it. There it is. Energy. For a brief moment, Daniel paused. The criticism continued, but instead of preparing an emotional response, he focused on the actual problem being discussed. The frustration sharpened his attention. Instead of arguing, he asked a question. What part of the plan concerns you most? The tone of the meeting changed. The conversation shifted from confrontation to problem-solving. Within minutes, the discussion became constructive. Several colleagues later commented on how calmly Daniel had handled the situation, but what they saw as calmness was not the absence of emotion. It was direction. The same emotional intensity that once caused reactions was now being used differently. Stress became focus. Pressure became clarity. Even outside of work, the change was becoming visible. During disagreements at home, Daniel noticed that arguments no longer escalated the way they once had. When frustration appeared, he recognized the surge of energy earlier. Instead of raising his voice, he redirected the tension into listening and responding carefully. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something he had not experienced before. Control. Not control over other people, control over his own reactions. He realized that Kenji had been right from the beginning. Emotion had never been the enemy. The real skill was learning how to guide its energy. Seiryoku Zen'yō had quietly reshaped the way Daniel approached pressure, conflict, and frustration. The emotions were still there, but now they served a different purpose. They had become fuel for disciplined action. Many people spend their lives fighting against their emotions. They try to suppress anger. They try to avoid stress. They try to eliminate frustration from their daily lives. But emotion was never designed to disappear. Emotion is part of how the human mind generates energy. The real problem is not emotion itself. The real problem is what happens when emotional energy has no direction. When anger appears without discipline, it turns into conflict. When stress appears without control, it turns into panic. When frustration appears without guidance, it turns into distraction. But the same energy can produce very different results when it is directed. Anger can become determination. Stress can become focus. Frustration can become persistence. This is the deeper lesson behind the principle of Seiryoku Zen'yō. The goal is not to remove emotional intensity from life. The goal is to use it efficiently. Just as a martial artist learns to guide physical force instead of resisting it, a disciplined mind learns to guide emotional energy instead of reacting to it. In modern life, pressure is unavoidable. Deadlines appear. Criticism appears. Unexpected problems appear. Trying to live without emotional intensity is impossible, but learning to direct emotional energy is a skill. A skill that can be practiced. A skill that grows stronger with awareness and discipline. Over time, the difference becomes visible. Two people may experience the same stress. One becomes overwhelmed. The other becomes focused. Two people may feel the same frustration. One reacts impulsively. The other turns the energy into action. The strongest individuals are not those who feel the least emotion. They are those who have learned how to guide emotional energy with discipline instead of letting it control them. Emotion is energy. Energy becomes power when it is directed. Discipline is the skill that gives that energy a purpose. Most people believe self-control means suppressing emotion, but the truth is different. Emotion will always appear. Anger will rise. Pressure will build. Frustration will return. The question is not whether you will feel these things. The question is what you will do with the energy they create. The principle of Seiryoku Zen'yō teaches a simple truth. Do not waste your energy reacting. Use it. Turn pressure into focus. Turn frustration into action. Turn emotion into disciplined movement forward. Because the strongest mind is not the one without emotion. It is the one that knows exactly where to direct it. If this idea resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments, in what moments of your life do your emotions control you the most? Your training begins there.